talk about it this evening. So I'll let him take it away.
All right. Well, thank you. Thanks for the invitation. Just to say where I'm coming from, I'm president of the Alpha Bird Nature Club. I'm also a long-time naturalist. I've been doing natural history since the early 60s when I was in the 8th grade. And I was a big birder at those days, and I've kind of looked at different taxa along the way, and moths happen to be one of them. Professionally, I worked for the Department of Conservation and Recreation. I was the assistant director at Quabbin Reservoir, and was in charge of the land operations there. So, you know, there was 75,000 acres of forest land and stuff that we maintained there. So. I was always interested in trying to figure out what the total community was as we do any forest management and other things. So, you know, for every action, there's a reaction, either positive or negative for something. So by learning my snakes and frogs and butterflies and moths and dragonflies and all this stuff, it gives me a better comprehension of what we're doing and how it affects things. So I still wind up doing some surveys at Quabbin. I'm doing a snake survey now for the last couple of years with cover boards for snakes and just kind of watching how those species are reacting to different things. And I also serve on the state's Natural Heritage Endangered Species Advisory Committee, which is the group that, you know, figures out what should be listed and what shouldn't. So I've been doing that for 7 years. So anyway, so that's kind of the background. And here we go. You know, this is probably like one of the real showcase moths. You know, we all know a Luna moth when we see it. And this was taken in my backyard at one of our parties. And you know, there's really, some of them are really spectacular, big, colorful, and you know, really show us some good stuff. You know, but they're, this is a friend of mine, Sandy Mallet, took this picture just a couple of weeks ago of a Gallium sphinx moth. And you really look at the, pointer? I haven't figured out how to run this yet. Well, that wasn't it. Well, let me just have it over again. I don't see it. There. So when you look at adult moths, they don't have any chewing mouth parts. So they actually use the proboscis to actually sip up liquid, whether it be the form of nectar. Some of them actually, particularly male butterflies, will be in a puddle where there's minerals dissolved in the water, and they'll lap up those minerals, you know, and they use that for reproduction. So, but the adult moths, you know, don't chew anything. It's the larvae that do all the good work that you kind of tend to not like all the time. But I thought Sandy, you got a pretty good glimpse of that proboscis. So there are some moths that we don't really like to have around. This is the Indian meal moth, and you know, it's one of the stored food pests that you can get into. Most of the moths don't really give us any trouble at all. There's a very few that the larvae will actually cause us some consternation. But they are important, many of them are important for migrating birds. This is a black-throated green warbler, and in the springtime, birders all know about the warbler neck. You know, you wind up being binoculars looking straight up into the tops of the oak trees and stuff as the birds are moving through. And what those birds are eating are actually the caterpillars of noctuid moths. And that's their whole food supply as they're moving north with the spring. And as the bud on the oak trees and other things break, that's when the moth caterpillars break. So one of the big concerns with global warming and any of these things that are going on is changes in the timing of these things. So if we have like a really early warm spring and the buds break early, is the food supply there when the warblers are coming by? Because they're in the Caribbean and don't really know what's happening in New England. So, you know, so that consistency is something that, that is really of interest to a lot of people. It's being studied very, very dramatically. So these are what's happening out there. These are the moth caterpillars, and they're really camouflaged with little sticks. It's really, you know, I'll talk about Sam Jaffe a bit later. He runs the Caterpillar Lab up in Keene, and it's a fabulous thing. And he's studied so much about caterpillars now that it's just a whole new thing. And I'll talk about more about caterpillars later, but this is what drives the bus for a lot of birds that are migrating north. Caterpillars themselves can be really spectacular looking. You know, here's a couple that are from my own yard. The speared dagger moth is on the bottom, and then the goldenrod hooded owlet caterpillar on the top. And both of these are actually quite common around the area. The thing that just happened in recent times is that we found out that using a black light flashlight, you can actually go out at night and find caterpillars, because the caterpillars reflect differently with the black light. And here's a couple of pictures. They actually glow in the dark when you shine the black light on them. So it really helps to try to find these things. This is from my friend David Moskowitz, took a couple of these, but it really sticks out. So there's this Sphinx moth caterpillar. But again, another tool to play with, and I'm really into that. So, but interesting that we can, now survey the yard in this time of year. This is a good time to do it, and to find many different caterpillars. Okay, so let's get down to, like, is it a butterfly or a moth? And it's a human construct, that this butterfly and moth. They're all Lepidoptera, and scientists a long time ago in the classification determined that if the Lepidoptera has a clubbed antenna, like you see up here on the right, has little bulbous clubs on it, it's a butterfly. And if it doesn't have clubs, either has a feathery antenna or just a straight antenna, it's a moth. And it's really just a human way of trying to figure it out and sort things. It really doesn't have much to do with anything. As we've got now with all the classifications, many of these butterflies fall within the middle of the moth, lineup. So it's really just something that we do to help us classify things. But as we get into DNA and all those other things, we're finding that some of these relationships we once thought were pretty clear-cut are not so. So here's a couple of moths that fly during the day. This is on the left. You see the white slant line on and then the famous gypsy moths are on the right here. And notice that the females don't fly. So they're so the males are the ones we see flying all around, and the females are just egg layers. They just they have pheromones that they send out. The males find the females, and then we have egg masses and then issues. But good stuff. So some of the other specialty moths that we see flying during the day, if you have primrose, there's actually a primrose moth that oftentimes can be found within the yellow flowers of the primrose. And one of my favorite ones up here at the top right is the Clymene moth. That's I always think of the Crusade shield or something when I look at that design on the upper wing. And also the eight-spotted forester down here on the bottom, a very often seen day flying moth that we get in the area. These are all pretty normally found in midsummer. So the rosy maple moth is probably the one that I get the most calls for. I'm on Facebook, and people send me pictures to get identified. This one probably comes up more than any other. This is the rosy maple moth. Very abundant this year. We had tons of them, right from the middle of June or onward. So it's really the shaggy hair, the whole thing. It's a pretty cool moth. Some of the other ones that are pretty distinctive. The yellow vein geometer, you know, was just classy in the Herald. And again, these are all in my yard right here in Central Mass. So then we start getting into some of the smaller things, and I'll talk just a little bit about cameras and stuff, because most of all these pictures were taken with this camera, which is a Panasonic Luminex, and it's it has some settings that give you a micro 3x zoom on it, so you can actually see something, you know, with an inch away from it, and actually get a focused picture. And it really, it's come a long ways. You know, 10 years ago we couldn't take pictures like this, and now everybody's got something, you know, that can take a good picture. And even now, cell phones are getting so good that many people are using cell phones to do these identifications, and it's good. So, but if you start to zoom in on these little guys, they're spectacular. You know, they're really, you know, some of these things I wouldn't even have noticed they were on the wall. You know what I mean? It's just, they're so small. But this is exceedingly common, the orange-headed Kalima. And, you know, I'll get 10 or 15 of those at a time on the wall. And, but again, it's so small that you just bypass it. So they come in all different shapes, sizes. You know, the northern thorn, you know, again, is a leaf, dead leaf mimic. The pig-striped goatworm I showed you before. The brown scoop wing with those big indentations in the wings. Really, you know, the shapes and sizes are just infinite. So the sphinx moth group is one that we see a lot. The tomato hornworm is a sphinx moth. You know, there's lots of the day-flying sphinxes, like I showed you the galleon sphinx earlier, and all the hummingbird moths are all day-flying sphinx moths. And these are more night-flying, and you know, again, these are all from my yard. And you know, that was one of the first parties that I had, moth parties. And you know, there's 4 species of sphinx on the same night, you know, on the same wall. And I have to admit, we moved them around so we could get the same picture. So one of my favorite groups is the underwing moths, and they're flying now. They're usually from late August into October. And I had the sweet fern underwing this week. And these others I get fairly regularly. But the whole concept of the underwing moths is that when they're closed up on the tree trunk where they're landed, they're just about invisible. Right. And then as a bird comes, you know, to peck at them, they flash that color of the underwing, and it startles the bird just long enough for it to make an escape. So that's the theory behind the patterns of color and shape here. And but there's several species, and some of them are pretty hard to tell apart. And you have to try to get the underwing pattern to help make your decision on some of the identifications. So a good friend of mine and one of my early mentors is Ted Sargent, who lives over in Leverett, Mass. And he was a professor at UMass, and he wrote a whole book on underwing moths, and you know, which I have, and it's really good. And he's also gotten himself in somewhat of a scientific struggle with the European scientists about this guy, the peppered moth. And many of us probably learned in school about industrial melanism and how, in England, how the soot of the factories and stuff, you know, made some of these dark, you know. Well, Ted doesn't believe it. And he wrote many papers about that, which was right in the consternation of many of the established scientists in the field. And it's actually pretty interesting reading. This book by Judith Hooper, of Moths and Men, and it's all about the conflict between, you know, tent sergeant calling the establishments, you know, bluffing this whole thing. So, but he actually did a lot of work and figured that, you know, in fact, let's go back one. I mean, I get quite a few of these dark pepper moths at my yard. So these, you know, it doesn't really hold true in this day and age why there would be a fair number of both. And so anyway, Ted went into the whole thing and kind of got rung up for it. So my year starts usually, the end of April, early May, as I start to, you know, we start getting warmer nights. And it really doesn't start to really pick up until June when you start to get the most variety of species. And this is just a little subset of some of the things that I've gotten in June. And, you know, the part that's really fun about it is you don't really, I never knew what I was going to see the next night. You know, you put the light on. In fact, my light is on now, so when I go home tonight, it'll be on and I can see what's showing up. But after doing it for 10 or 15 years, it starts to get some patterns, and we know, you know, kind of what groups are going to show over what part of the season. And also what's happening too is that as the night progresses, you get some things that'll fly early in the evening, and some things don't fly till after midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. So what many of us do, some people just stay up. That's works for young people. But I tend to, you know, go to bed, get up at 3 in the morning, go out, check my lights, and then I turn them off so that the moths have a chance to dissipate away from my lights before the morning and the birds get up, and, you know, they just love to see leftover moths, you know. But it's really interesting how as the night progresses, the different things start to show up. And then here we go in July. This is just, you know, it starts to get really busy, and there's lots and lots of different things that can be seen. And I just, you know, say that in my yard, I don't know exactly the number, because it's not like I have a checklist, but I have like 6,000 photographs that have been identified to species. And I think we're up to around almost 1,000 species now for my yard. And I probably have another 500 little guys that are not easily identified by photograph. And there's other things that can't be separated as species without dissecting them and looking at the genital parts and stuff, which I'm not going to do that. You know, again, you know, when I took my class, we did that. And that was good. I know how to do it. That's all I need to know. But, so this week, you know, this is on the 22nd. I had these guys, among other things. But I just think that the colors and the patterns are just magnificent. You know, the sensitive fern borer, there's a whole group of these borers that kind of have that same coppery ground color. They have patches of white in different places. And so I probably have 7 or 8 species that fall into their group. And then the hologram moth is just really cool. You know, and it's in a group with another 8 or 10 species that have various markings on them. But this is the one that's really, you know, that sheen of green is just, you know, just reflective. Really cool stuff. And that was really, you know, that's just what's happening right now, you know. So some of the cool things to see are these mimics. And these are actual moths and not wasps at all. The one on the left, the red oak clearwing moth, is it's in the borer family, and they actually lay eggs, and the larvae actually work into the wood of trees. And same with the maple callus borer, which is very common. It comes to the light readily. The other one, I actually use a pheromone trap to attract these guys. And it's the apple industry in particular, and some other citrus people, they have commercial pheromones that you can get. And what they use them for is to find out when they should be treating their trees for spraying and stuff. So, you know, they'll put these traps up. When the traps start to get certain species, they know it's time to come in and do treatment on their apple trees and stuff. I take their picture and let them go. Right. You know, much to my wife's chagrin, but they're really kind of cool. And you know, completely docile. You take them out, you can you know, pass them around and stuff. And people are pretty unnerved at first. But again, remember that a moth doesn't even have a mouth part, it has a straw, and there is no stinger. So, pretty cool though. So, part of the work that I've done, you know, by later years here is actually work with natural heritage and surveying for rare species in many places. This is out of the Montague sand plains, out in Turner's Falls and in Montague. And it's a fairly extensive pitch pine scrub oak habitat. And this particular year, we went there on October 1st, and I found maybe about 200 buck moths, which was like really spectacular. They've been doing management on the area to get the habitat really spoofed up, and they're really beautiful. And I found one female laying eggs, and it's interesting how she kind of goes all the way around the stem with these eggs. And this is a good fall Christmas card or something like that. You know. But anyway, yeah, so this is the female buck laying her eggs. And they start off white, and then they turn dark as they dry up, solidify. So it has a sister species that's actually flying right now. This is the New England buck moth, and it's much more widespread. And you know, the big thing about it's not an endangered species, but we're looking at it, and it overlaps a little bit. It flies like 2 to 3 weeks earlier than the Barron's buck moth, and has a little bit different habitat. It's more variable in its habitat use. So, but a cool moth. This is an area where I found 10, 15 of these guys at a wildlife clearing that we did out in Athol. And we're talking about Gardner. This is a photograph that Jeff sent me. Not a smart buck moth. We really don't think that the larvae are really going to like the chain link fence as a host you know, but it's interesting that they have a very similar pattern of egg laying where they go all the way around the circle and put their eggs in, but probably wasn't the best choice. And, you know, I've traveled around a lot. My wife and I were out in California, the Eastern Sierras, and this is the same family. This is the Hemiluca elegantrina, the elegant sheep moth, and this is obligative sagebrush. And as soon as I saw this out there, I said, that's one of the buck moths. And pretty cool. So you can learn right across the country there's very similar things and similar different host plants and different habitats, but very similar stuff. And again, it's, you know, late August we're there. So this is one that I haven't seen myself, but last year it showed up in a couple places. One in Concord. And the host plant is rattlebox. And this is the ornate bella moth. And it's coming up from the south. So we don't know if it's going to be having a population here in the future, at least just the advanced guard that showed up. But it's a pretty easily identifiable moth. It's very, you know, very showy and spectacular, and one that we'll be watching to see how it prospers over the next few years. It doesn't seem to be a pest. It seems all right. And rattlebox is not a very common plant for us either. So here we go. Lights and camera. So how do we get all these 1,000 species of moths to come to my yard? You know, and part of it is putting up various lights. And what's happening with the lights is that there's various wavelengths of light are attracted to different moths. So, you know, some of the blue-green spectrum more attract more species than in the white spectrum. So as you go through this whole thing, I'll show you a couple of examples. I showed you my camera. People, what I do with my camera, I have this thing, little stick that I stuck in the bottom of it. This is a very expensive item that you could probably get about 10 minutes worth of work. But it allows me to hold the camera with one hand. In the other hand, I have a flashlight. So I'm able to do the white balance on the camera with that combination. Other people, because when you look at these different lights, I have a mercury vapor light, it's one of my lights. There's a black light and stuff, but those give you a very weird color stuff if you're just taking a straight picture. So the white light of the flashlight helps to balance out those odd colors that actually attracted the moth. So that's part of the whole thing is trying to figure out your own equipment and how to do it. Other people, sometimes using a flash, the flash overpowers things. You wind up with a very washed out look. But anyway, this is the kind of stuff that can happen if you a lot of animals there. So when I tell people that to just play around a little bit, if you get the black light bulb, that you can get them in any hardware store for around $5, and that black light spectrum has a very different appeal to various moth species, and just by swapping out into that, you can really increase the number of moth species that you get. This is what I take when I go on vacation and staying in hotels. Much to the chagrin of the hotel people, sometimes I'll be switching out the lights in the outside of the hotel for one of these just to see what we can find. But it's real simple, real easy, and gives you a little more, look at what might be out there. This is my back wall. This is right on my patio, and that is a mercury vapor light. And they talk about sheets and stuff. Well, the sheet really helps to reflect that light back out into the woods and the field. So I prefer to have a small sheet because I like taking photographs on the wood, the wood wall of the shed, and it just gives you a lot better color balance. But that sheet does help to make that seem like a lot more light than it would otherwise. And you can see lots of cool stuff there. I mean, there's a Luna moth and, some pale beauties, and I think there's a frog on there too. But really, this is not uncommon to come out and see like the wall full of insects. So another method to use, and as we get into this time of year, this is a method I usually use in the fall, and I've actually gotten moths every month of the year. There's moths that overwinter as adults, and any day that's above 40 degrees, they actually will fly and move around. So by making up a bait, and oftentimes you can use fruit, bananas, some brown sugar, and let it ferment. And then you use a paintbrush and you try to make it fairly thick, because you don't want it to drip down the tree, because then you just be attracting ants. So you want to separate the patch of bait, and it's remarkably effective on several moths that wouldn't necessarily come to the light. So, and many moths that overwinter actually feed on tree sap. When you figure in the, over winter, the snowstorms and ice storms break branches, and those branches bleed sap. Those sugary saps are very good source of food for several moths. All your morning cloaks and your question marks and commas and several others like that are really attuned to that sap feeding. And this kind of helps mimic that feeding stuff. And if it smells a little bit, all the better. On the top is actually a wine rope. You take a cotton rope and you make a sangria kind of wine mix, and you just soak the rope in the mix, and then drape the rope over a branch, and the moths will come and land on the rope. It works. in the South, they really go crazy for this stuff. In Arizona, I've seen it a lot. And really just taking an old onion bag and filling it full of stuff and just letting it, kind of ferment on the wing. And this is a lady from Florida that put this out. Pretty effective. I mean, she gets a lot of stuff. I don't know how long you want to leave it out there. It may, especially with bears and stuff. I think the bears are really like that. But anyway, it works. So this is a green arches on the bait. So he's come in to actually lap up the liquid. And again, I don't get these off at the light, but they'll come with the bait. It's one of the underwings, Ultronia. This was actually out in Nantucket. We did that in 2012. Time flies. But anyway, you see the bait actually does help to bring things in. So one of the things that really is, I haven't looked at as much as I should, but this light attracts not just moths, it attracts other things too. And this is a longhorn flower beetle. And there's lots of longhorn beetles, and I have a whole stash of photographs that I will identify some here. But I'm not there yet. But some of these showy ones I'll look at and try to figure them out. And I'll give you some resources for doing that in a minute. So this, again, is this week. This is what was on the sheet, or on the wall, like in the last couple of nights. That's the two-spotted tree cricket, and then the ground cricket, which I think is the Carolina ground cricket, and then the leafhopper. But all of these were around, what I do, the 22nd, I guess. But that's only a small portion of what's going on. And right now, if you go out, the chorus of night-calling insects is just wonderful. You know what I mean? It's, I went to a class myself a couple of weeks ago at the Audubon Sanctuary in East Hampton. And, I was a little amazed because when he first started the talk, he, did the sound. And I said, geez, I didn't hear a thing. But he wound up turning it up, and I was able to finally hear what he was showing me. But I may be getting too long in the tooth for some of that identification. But some of them are loud, some of them are really easy to identify. And but together, there's a chorus of these night-calling insects. It's just fabulous. So this is one of my favorite discoveries on my wall. This is a mantid fly. And if you see, in that eye color, I've taken many pictures of this, and that eye, that's where it always comes out. It just looks something supernatural about it. And on the front legs are modified just like a praying mantis. And they are actually, used to grab insects with those claws. And I watched this guy for about 30 minutes. And he finally went up and grabbed the moth. But you see, he's really, I don't know why, you need to have monster movie stuff. This guy would be great. If he was 6 feet tall, you'd really be worried about it. But really interesting insect. So I did say that that I went and took some classes, and those are opportunities still out there. I went to the Southwest Research Station in Portal, Arizona for a 10-day class on just moths. And it was really interesting. It was a very sleepless time. The research station is very strict. They eat breakfast at 7, supper at 6, and noon lunch. And, we would stay up till 1 or 2 in the morning looking at moths. And then we get up and go birding in the morning because it was Arizona. Why not, And then back to this. But it was a really great class, and there were like 8 instructors for 18 people. So it was really very, very hands-on, and it's just a gorgeous place. They also offer similar classes at the Eagle Hill in Maine. So different years. So those are 2. And these, places you go and stay in the dorm or whatever, and get yourself immersed in the whole thing, which is really quite good. The equipment that they had was excellent. Great microscopes and stuff. And, I know there were they were trying to show how to do those little micro moths and kind of how to mount them. And I realized with the number of thumbs that I have, it just wasn't for me. But there was some pretty artistic people there. So this is just a few examples of what I saw in Arizona on our evening forays. I did learn right off the bat about, at the campus they had probably 5 different stations with lights set up and everything, and you'd walk from one to the next. Well, rattlesnakes are pretty common there. And the very, very first night we were in class and we were in that building, and there was a porch with a big light and a sheet and there's a bench, and someone says, there's a snake under that bench. It was a black-tailed rattlesnake. And so I kept my stick with me at all times after that. But gorgeous moths. I mean, it was really spectacular. In the this is part of the research station, and we actually used these lights on the bottom. We went out a couple different times into the desert at night, and we put these traps out to capture the moths. And the only thing that was troubling about that was the Border Patrol. They really thought we were signaling planes for marijuana drops or something, but we got through that all right. But that was early, I don't know if you'd work today or not, but it was really pretty cool. And on two different times in this trip I saw mountain lions, so one was out one of the evenings, we were out in the middle of right across the road in front of us, and another time was right at midday. The caretaker's dog was barking, and then all of a sudden you hear this big roar, and then this mountain lion came dashing through the compound. So, pretty cool place. So I go there. I've been to Arizona about 8 or 10 times now for different things. I've been for birds, I've been for dragonflies, I've been for moths, so butterflies, everything. So, great places. This is the setup out in the desert we did. This is actually up in the mountaintop. And again, elevation is a whole different aspect of things. We get totally different species in the floor of the canyon versus up on top of the hill. You get a whole different array of species. So when we're looking at this stuff, even in a place like Massachusetts, the southeastern part of the state has very different species that we have up in the central part here where we are. So it makes it kind of exciting and fun to move around. So one of the things we like to do is to have parties. And I've done this many places, done it at Broadman, Brooklyn, Worcester. We've done it at the Tower Hill Botanical Garden. We've been around doing this, and we basically go up and set up your lights and everything. And the trick about this is people don't often stay up late enough, because they're really just getting into the good stuff. And people say, "Well, my shift's over pretty quick, and I need to go home." So, but we take care of that at least once a year at the Mothball. And this is, we have this at my house, and this year we had about 65 people came. And this is an all-night affair for as long as you want to play. And we set up a tent out on the edge of the woods. We have the permanent setup that I have, and depends who comes different years. People set up different things and bait and everything else. And the only thing that happened this year, that tent right there, I usually have it in the woods. Well, about 4:30, 5 o'clock, we're getting things set up, and a bear and 3 cubs decided to hang around the yard just then. And so we just went down and put the tent in where we always put it, just inside the woods. And the mother bear was probably from here to the back of the room, and the 3 cubs were in the tree right above her. So we backed up and put the tent on the edge of the yard instead of doing that. We had a lot of people come, and it's just a lot of fun. And a lot of what I know about my list is that we do keep a list from that day each year. This is like our 11th year. And that list is, several hundred species on it from that day. So it's a kind of fun thing to do. Lori Griffin Burns has written a new kids book on moth, and she called it The Mothball. And actually, it'll be coming out in April of 2020. But her instigation for for doing this has been coming to our parties and stuff and doing that, so it's kind of cool. This is one of our parties. This is at the Mount Grace Land Conservation Trust, and again, this is, you know, beautiful nights, summer nights. This is something you can do. You know, I worry now about the Triple E stuff that's going on, and I noticed that, you know, myself, if I go out after 2 or 3 hours after dark, you know, the mosquito stuff, it really dissipates tremendously. So, but I still, you know, that dusk time, you just want to stay away from it. And really, the moths aren't very good early on anyway, so it's better to wait and come out later on. I do worry about spraying and, you know, what's happening with all that, and you know, what are the consequences, the unintended consequences of some of these things, you know, with amphibians, with, you know, monarchs are migrating right now, so there's lots of things happening. So it's sad to see it all happening. So I do have these 3 books with me. You know, the Peterson Field Guide, Seabrook Leckie, I've actually, she's come and stayed at my house and done rock parties and stuff, and we did a project down in Nantucket. But this is the first really good field guide to the Northeast. And they've since done the Southeastern version now, and there's one being done for the West. So, but this is full of photographs and stuff, and it's really a good way to try to get to your families and what you're doing. And then if we start to get, you know, what I usually do with all of these is I try to get myself close using these books, and then I'll go and go online and get some more information. There's a couple of good websites I'll show you. Tom Murray's book, and Tom's from Groton, Mass. You know, he has a few thousand pictures here, but he has like 40,000 identified pictures on the website Bug Guide. You know, so he's like become like the world's expert in many things. And really, you know, in his day job, he was a car parts salesman, and he traveled all over New England and took pictures of stuff. But it's a great book and a great reference. So so certainly the Insects of New England and New York is a good place to start. And a good friend Dave Wagner down at the University of Connecticut.
Yes.
You know, this caterpillar book is extremely useful. You know, it doesn't have everything, but there's 700 species in here, and again, you can get pretty close to what you're trying to find. So I recommend these 3 books for those of us that are in Central Mass, and you're welcome to take a look at these, you know, afterwards. Because again, they're really good stuff, and they're local to our area. So, you know, if you go, particularly, you know, we talked a little bit before about dragonflies. When I first started dragonflies, there were no field guides. It was all these big tomes of books that, you know, each of them, there were like 3-volume sets, and they weighed 50 pounds apiece. And now you can get a dragonflies in Massachusetts or dragonflies in New Jersey or wherever you're going to go. Is, you know, really specialized books. And butterflies has done that, and, you know, moths is getting there. So as more people take an interest in moths, I think we'll see more of that happening. So something I've started to do fairly recently, because I have peer pressure, is the iNaturalist, and it's kind of cool. You can get an app for your phone and actually take a picture of things, and they'll give you suggestions about what it might be, and you can, you know, then there's a process where you can look at other people's stuff and agree with the identification or not, or give it alternate identification, and it's really kind of good. So friends with the Natural Heritage Program was most kind of pushing towards this, but they're trying to set it up so that their wildlife management areas are all have a hotspot for the iNaturalist, so that any observations that are made, you know, in those wildlife management areas actually get captured by the heritage staff, and then they can confirm, you know, rare species or whatever, you know, where they can. So, so it's relatively, it's been around a while, but it's around long enough now that there's millions of submissions, and it uses, that whole, the software, facial recognition type software to try to identify the different things. It's very good for most plant, leaves. It does those really well. Those flowers it does pretty well, and they're getting there with all this other stuff. But it's a matter of how many experts are around to give the comment on the final determination. But I've been using it a bit, and it's kind of fun. So the other thing that I do is, I mentioned is I go to this website called the Moth Photographers Group, and in that group you will see, you can search different ways. If you know that you're looking for Sphinx moth, you can go to those pages. It'll give you the different choices. You can narrow down the field to just Massachusetts if you want to, so you're not seeing stuff that's in Arizona to help confuse you. And again, they give you many, many pictures of the species so that you can really make some comparisons, because there's quite a bit of variation in some things. And this is a moth photography group. And yeah, this is Tom's. This is Tom Murray's P-base. Whenever I get confused, I go to Tom Murray, and you can just Google Tom Murray, and he again has many things. The thing about when I look at some of these things, like a bug guide and moth photographers group, I'll see a picture of something and look, oh, it's from Athol, Mass. Oh, Tom was at my house, but it's kind of cool. But there's a good resource, and he's got everything well identified. So every year now, and I'm actually on the Scientific Technical Advisory Committee for this group, the National Moth Week, and it's like the third week in July each year. And this was the dates this year. And it's international at this point. They're having these moth nights around the world practically. And it's kind of fun stuff. And they're collecting information. And now there's an iNaturalist component to this, so you can join that using your iNaturalist stuff to put data into this group stuff. So people are trying to work together. I mentioned Sam Jaffe. He is doing an incredible job of teaching people about caterpillars. And his photography is amazing. And he goes around all the different museums and schools and whatnot. And if you're, I would highly recommend, working with the lab. You get them to come out for a session some summer, because I know the Athol Library did it and others do. But it's really good stuff. I mean, he's extremely knowledgeable, and the staff that he gets a lot of young people to work with him, and I just love to see younger people really taking a hold, So, more information. I have pamphlets about our Athol Bird Nature Club, and we do have lots of different field trips on all different taxa. We actually, we do butterfly trips and dragonfly trips and moth trips and even birds, So, but by all means, check us out, and we'll keep a light on for you. So there we go. All right, I'll be happy to take questions.
You mentioned Sam.
Yeah.
Was he doing something down at the Acton Discovery Museum in the last few weeks?
Yeah, he had,
Oh, that was him, okay.
Yeah.
I took my granddaughter down there and was like, wow, this is amazing.
Yeah.
But she was 3.5, so it was amazing.
That's good.
A few minutes.
Yeah, yeah, but absolutely, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
cool. Yeah.
it is a really professional
It
layout.
was really well done. I
Yeah.
think they're there for several weeks, so I'm not sure.
Yeah,
when that is.
I saw that listed, and again, keep watching for the Caterpillar lab, because, he's really, he's got a full-time staff person working with him now, so he's starting to churn it up. Yeah. Well, any other questions? Feel free to look at the books, look at the camera, look at stuff. I mean, we're lucky to be in the Northeast to have the resources that we kind of do it first here. You know, and it's, you know, we did the first regional dragonfly book, and we, you know, we did the first moth book. You know, so we're kind of fortunate to be up here in the Northeast where there's lots of scientifically minded people to be working on stuff. And citizen science is very much alive and well. You know, and there's lots that we can contribute as we move forward. So, all right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.